Your brother deserves everything. That's what my father said, standing in his study with the will laid out on the mahogany desk like a verdict I'd already lost. My mother sat in the leather chair by the window, silent as always, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying for this conversation to end. Trevor has the vision, the drive, Dad continued, not even looking at me. The house, the company, it all goes to him. You understand, don't you, Morgan? I stood there, 28 years old, holding a briefcase full of quarterly reports I'd spent 3 years perfecting, reports that had saved his failing business, and realized I'd been auditioning for a role that was never mine to win. I understand, I said quietly. And I did. I understood that loyalty without a last name meant nothing. That competence without a penis was invisible. That I'd spent a decade building something my brother would inherit in an afternoon. 1 month later, when the IRS agents walked into that company with boxes and badges, when the house went into foreclosure, when Trevor's face appeared on the local news in handcuffs, my father finally called me. But by then, I'd learned something he never taught me. Sometimes the best inheritance is the one you don't receive. Before I tell you how everything unraveled, tell me where you're listening from, so I know I'm not the only one who had to watch their family choose wrong and pay for it. From the outside, the Ashford family looked like American success incarnate. My father, Richard Ashford, built Ashford Industrial Supply from a single warehouse in Newark into a regional powerhouse worth $8 million. For 40 years, he moved steel, copper, industrial parts, the unglamorous backbone of construction and manufacturing. He wasn't flashy. He was ruthless, methodical, old school. The kind of man who believed hard work was holy and nepotism was just family values. My name is Morgan Ashford. I'm 28 now, a financial consultant for mid-sized businesses, specializing in restructuring and fraud detection. The irony of my specialty isn't lost on anyone who knows my story. Growing up, I was the eldest. Responsible, detail-oriented, the kid who did homework without being asked and balanced my own checkbook at 14. My brother Trevor, 3 years younger, was different, charismatic, effortlessly charming, the kind of person who could talk his way out of anything but never into actual work. Where I studied, he partied. Where I built, he coasted. But in my father's eyes, Trevor had something I never would, potential. An AY chromosome. My mother, Eleanor, was a faded beauty who'd given up her own career in accounting to support my father's business. She kept the books in the early years, managed payroll, handled vendor relations. But once the business grew, Dad hired real accountants and Mom became decorative. A hostess. A silent partner in her own diminishment. I watched her shrink year by year, and swore I'd never do the same. I went to Rutgers, majored in finance and business management, graduated with honors. Trevor went to community college for a year, dropped out, and spent 2 years, finding himself, in Colorado, which mostly meant skiing and bartending. When he came back at 23, suntanned and empty-handed, my father hired him immediately as Director of Business Development, a title with no clear responsibilities but a 6-figure salary. I'd been working at the company since I was 18. Started in the warehouse, loading trucks. Then inventory management. Then accounts receivable. Then financial operations. I knew every corner of that business, every vendor relationship, every contract, every weak point in our cash flow. By the time I was 25, I was effectively running financial operations while Dad focused on legacy planning and golf. Trevor's development seemed to involve long lunches, client dinners he expensed, and showing up late smelling like last night's bar. But Dad loved it. He's building relationships, he'd say. That's the future of this business, connections, personality. Numbers, apparently, were just details. 3 years ago, the company hit trouble. A major client went bankrupt owing us $600,000. Our credit lines were maxed. Payroll was tight. Dad called a family meeting, me, Trevor, Mom, and laid out the crisis. We need to cut costs and find new revenue, fast. I spent the next 6 months working 18-hour days. Renegotiated vendor contracts, restructured our payment terms. identified 3 new client sectors we weren't serving, and built financial models showing how we could diversify. I found $200,000 in operational waste, streamlined logistics, and personally closed 2 new contracts worth $1.2 million annually. The company stabilized. Then thrived. Within a year, we were more profitable than ever. At the annual shareholder meeting, just Dad, really, since he owned everything, he stood up and gave a speech. This turnaround happened because of vision, leadership, and the Ashford family commitment to excellence. He put his hand on Trevor's shoulder. My son has shown me he's ready to take this company into the future. Trevor, who'd contributed nothing but signature cologne to client meetings, smiled and waved. I sat in the back row, holding the financial reports that told the real story, and said nothing. That's when I knew. I could work forever, save the company 100 times, and it would never matter. Because Trevor was the son. And I was just Morgan. 6 months ago, Dad called me into his study. The same room where he'd made every major family decision for 40 years. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, the faint smell of cigars and old money. My mother was already there, perched on the chair by the window like a bird that had forgotten how to fly. Sit, Dad said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I sat. On the desk between us was a leather portfolio embossed with gold letters, Last Will and Testament of Richard James Ashford. I'm not dying, he said, reading my expression. But I'm 71. It's time to formalize succession planning. Your mother and I have made some decisions. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Okay. The house goes to Trevor, he said simply, as if announcing the weather. The company goes to Trevor. There's a life insurance policy, $500,000, that will be split between you and your mother. But the business assets, the real estate, the legacy, that stays with the Ashford name. I blinked. I have the Ashford name. You know what I mean, he said, impatience creeping into his voice. The family line. Your brother will carry it forward. You'll likely marry, take another name. That's not guaranteed. Morgan. His tone sharpened. This isn't a negotiation. Your brother has been groomed for this. He understands the vision. I've been running financial operations for 3 years, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. I saved this company. Trevor doesn't even know how to read a P&L statement. He doesn't need to, Dad replied. He'll hire people for that. Leadership isn't about spreadsheets. It's about presence, decisiveness, legacy. So 10 years of my work means nothing. It means you've been a valuable employee, he said, as if that settled it. And you'll be compensated fairly when the time comes. But the company needs a leader who can command respect. Your brother has that. I looked at my mother. She stared out the window, her jaw tight, saying nothing. The same silence that had defined her whole life. Is that it? I asked. That's it, Dad confirmed. I wanted you to hear it from me, not from lawyers later. No surprises. I stood up slowly, picking up my bag. You're right. No surprises. I walked out of that study, down the hallway lined with photos of Trevor at every milestone, Little League, high school graduation, his fake college acceptance he never followed through on, and out the front door. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house I'd grown up in. The house that would be Trevor's. The company I'd saved that would be Trevor's. The legacy I'd built that would have someone else's name on it. Then I did something I'd never done before. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. I spent the next 3 weeks working quietly. On the surface, nothing changed. I showed up to work, ran my reports, managed operations. But after hours, in my apartment, I built a different kind of portfolio. Every financial irregularity I'd noticed and mentally filed away over the years, I now documented with dates, amounts, and evidence. Trevor's expense reports, $47,000 in 1 year. 4. Client entertainment, with no documented clients. Vendor invoices that didn't match inventory receipts. Credit card charges at strip clubs labeled as business development. A company truck registered to the business but parked at Trevor's apartment complex every night. Payroll bonuses Trevor authorized for himself, bypassing standard approval processes. Then there were the bigger issues. The ones I'd been quietly fixing to protect the company. The contract Trevor had signed without legal review that exposed us to massive liability. The client payment he'd personally collected, $35,000 cash, that never made it into company accounts. The tax deductions he'd been claiming on personal expenses. I documented everything. Spreadsheets. Screenshots. Bank records I had access to as financial manager. Emails where Trevor asked me to adjust the numbers or smooth out the reporting for Dad. I organized it all into a single encrypted file and backed it up in 3 places. Then I called an old friend from Rutgers who now worked as a forensic accountant for the IRS. "Sarah," I said when she answered. "I need advice." Hypothetically. Hypothetically, she repeated, amused. "Go ahead. If someone discovered potential tax fraud and misappropriation of funds at a family business, what would be the proper channels to report it?" There was a pause. "Morgan, what's going on?" Hypothetically. Hypothetically, she cut in, that someone would be protected as a whistleblower under federal law. And if the fraud involves amounts over $50,000, the IRS takes it very seriously. "Why?" "Just curious," I said. "Morgan." Her voice softened. "If you're sitting on something real, you need to be careful. Family makes this complicated." "Family made this complicated a long time ago," I replied. "I'm just deciding whether to uncomplicate it." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the encrypted file on my laptop. This wasn't just data. This was a bomb. One that would destroy my brother, damage my father's legacy, and possibly implode the company I'd worked so hard to save. I could send it. Or I could delete it and spend the rest of my life watching Trevor fumble everything I'd built. I opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass, and made my decision. I sent the file to Sarah with a simple message, not hypothetical. "Please advise on next steps." Her response came within an hour. "Holy shit. We need to talk." The next 6 weeks were a masterclass in patience. Sarah connected me with investigators at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I walked them through everything: the expense fraud, the unreported income, the tax evasion, the misappropriation of company funds. They asked careful questions, requested additional documentation, and told me to act normal. "Don't change your behavior," the lead investigator, Agent Torres, instructed. "We'll need time to build the case. If your brother or father suspects anything, they might destroy evidence." So I went to work every day. Smiled at Trevor when he bragged about his latest deal. Nodded when Dad talked about succession plans. Sat through family dinners where they discussed the future of Ashford Industrial as if I were a guest, not the person keeping it alive. My mother noticed something. One evening, while Dad and Trevor watched football, she followed me into the kitchen. "You're different," she said quietly. "Am I?" "Quieter. Like you're waiting for something." I met her eyes. For the first time in years, I saw something other than resignation there. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "I'm tired of waiting," I said simply. She nodded slowly, then squeezed my hand once before walking away. 3 days later, my father's lawyer called me. "Morgan, we need you to sign some transition documents. Formalizing your brother's role as successor, waiving any future claims to company ownership." Standard stuff. "I'll need time to review with my own attorney," I said. "There's really no need." "I insist." There was a pause. "Of course. Take your time." I never signed anything. I didn't need to. The clock was already running. On a Tuesday morning in late September, I was at my desk when I heard shouting from my father's office. Then I saw them, 4 people in dark suits with badges, walking through the warehouse floor with boxes. IRS criminal investigation. The office went silent. Everyone stopped working, watching as agents entered my father's office, then Trevor's. I stayed at my desk, hands steady on my keyboard, and waited. 20 minutes later, Trevor was walked out in handcuffs. His face was red, confused, furious. He spotted me through the glass walls of my office, and something in his expression shifted, from confusion to understanding to pure hatred. My father emerged next, not cuffed but shaken, his lawyer beside him barking instructions into a phone. He looked old suddenly. Breakable. Agent Torres appeared at my office door. "Ms. Ashford, we'll need to ask you some questions." "As a witness." "Of course," I said calmly. As I walked past my father in the hallway, he grabbed my arm. "Did you know about this?" I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. "About what, Dad? Trevor's fraud? Or the fact that you were about to hand him a company he was actively embezzling from?" His grip loosened. You turned in your own brother?" "I reported financial crimes," I said quietly. "The fact that the criminal was family doesn't change the law. This will destroy everything." "No," I interrupted. "Trevor was destroying everything. I just documented it." I pulled my arm free and followed Agent Torres down the hall, leaving my father standing alone in the ruins of his legacy. The next 72 hours were chaos. The story hit local news: heir to industrial supply company arrested for fraud and tax evasion. The company's bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. Clients started calling, panicked. Vendors demanded payment. Employees whispered in corners, terrified for their jobs. My father holed up with lawyers. Trevor was released on bail, immediately blaming me in a screaming phone call I let go to voicemail. My mother called once, crying, asking how I could do this to the family. "The same way you did nothing while they erased me," I said, and hung up. On day 4, the company's board, really just Dad and his 2 oldest friends, called an emergency meeting. I was invited as interim financial officer since Trevor was, legally speaking, indisposed. I walked into the conference room to find 3 old men who looked like they'd aged a decade in a week. "Morgan," Dad said, his voice hollow. "The company's accounts are frozen. We can't make payroll. We can't pay vendors. If this continues, we'll have to file bankruptcy within 30 days. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up a presentation I'd prepared 3 days earlier. "I have a proposal," I said. They stared. "I've been contacted by 3 of our largest clients. They're willing to continue contracts if there's stable leadership. I've also negotiated a temporary line of credit with First Union Bank, $500,000 to cover immediate operations while the IRS investigation continues. But there are conditions." "What conditions?" one of the board members asked. "I take over as CEO, effective immediately. Trevor is permanently removed from all company roles. The business is restructured as an LLC with professional management, no more family legacy appointments. And Dad steps into an advisory role only." My father's face turned red. "You're extorting us." "I'm saving you," I corrected calmly. "The IRS will likely seize company assets to cover Trevor's tax liability. But if we cooperate, restructure, and demonstrate new leadership committed to compliance, we might survive. Maybe even keep the Ashford name on the building." "This is blackmail," he hissed. "This is consequence," I replied. "You gave Trevor everything because he deserved it. Turns out, he deserved exactly what he got, a fraud investigation. Now you can either let me fix this, or you can lose everything out of pride." The room went silent. The 2 board members looked at each other, then at my father. "Richard," one said gently. "She's right. We don't have another option." My father stared at me with something I'd never seen before: defeat. And beneath it, a flicker of recognition. He was finally seeing me. Not as an employee. Not as a daughter he could dismiss. As the person who'd been holding his legacy together while he handed it to someone who was burning it down. Fine, he said, the word like broken glass. Do it. I nodded once. I'll need the transition documents signed by end of business today. He signed them at 4:47 p.m., his hands shaking. 3 months later, the company was stable. I'd restructured operations, settled with the IRS for a payment plan that kept us solvent, and rebuilt relationships with clients who'd been ready to walk. Trevor pled guilty to tax evasion and wire fraud, receiving 18 months in federal prison and 5 years probation. The house, my father's beloved house, was sold to pay his legal fees and restitution. My father moved to a condo in Florida. We don't talk much. He sends occasional emails, awkward attempts at reconciliation that read like business correspondence. I respond politely. The wound is too deep for anything more. My mother visits sometimes. She's different now, lighter, somehow. She got a job doing bookkeeping for a nonprofit. I forgot I was good at this, she told me over coffee. I forgot I was good at anything. You were always good, I said. You just stopped believing it. She squeezed my hand. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you. I know, I said. And I did. Trevor writes me letters from prison. Angry ones at first, blaming me for ruining his life. Then confused ones, asking why I betrayed family. The most recent one, 3 weeks ago, was different. Shorter. I get it now. I never earned anything. I'm sorry. I haven't responded. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Some apologies are more about the person giving them than the person receiving them. Last week, I changed the company name. Ashford Industrial Supply is now Ashford and Associates. The Associates includes me, 3 senior managers I promoted, and a path for employee ownership. My father's legacy isn't gone. It's just no longer centered on bloodline and entitlement. The most satisfying moment came 2 months ago. I was in my office, Dad's old office, now mine, when a young woman knocked on my door. 22, fresh out of college, nervous. Ms. Ashford? I'm here for the financial analyst interview. I stood up, shook her hand, and saw myself at her age. Eager, capable, invisible. Tell me, I said, what makes you think you're right for this role? She took a breath. I'm detail-oriented, I work harder than anyone I know, and I'm tired of being underestimated because I'm young and female. I smiled. You're hired. Start Monday. Her eyes widened. Don't you want to see my resume? Check references. I already did, I said. But what got you the job was that last part. Around here, we don't reward entitlement. We reward competence. That evening, I stood in the warehouse where I'd started 12 years ago, loading trucks at 18. The space looked different now, better organized, more efficient, humming with the kind of quiet productivity that comes from people who feel valued. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. I saw the new company name. Your mother told me about the employee ownership plan. I suppose I should have listened to you years ago. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, yes. You should have. I didn't add anything else. Didn't soften it with reassurance or forgiveness he hadn't fully earned yet. Just the truth, plain and unadorned. As I walked to my car, the autumn air cool against my face, I thought about the wool sitting in Dad's study that day. Your brother deserves everything. He got everything, all right. Everything he deserved. And I got something better. Something I built myself, without permission or inheritance or a name that opened doors. I got proof that the best legacy isn't the one you're given. It's the one you create when everyone tells you you're not worthy of it. If you've ever been told you don't deserve something you earned, if you've ever watched mediocrity get rewarded while your excellence was ignored, if you've ever had to save the people who never saved you, You know this feeling. It's not revenge. It's not even justice. It's just clarity. The cold, clean understanding that your worth was never determined by their recognition. Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not the only one who had to build their inheritance from the ground up. And subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, earned respect, and the moment you finally stop waiting for permission to claim what's already yours.